In this week's Bizline, Vietnam attracts significant high-tech FDI. And later on, FDI attraction, Vietnamese economy's bright spot in 2024. Welcome to today's Bizline, where we'll delve into the most exciting shifts in Vietnam's business landscape. Vietnam is rapidly transforming into a burgeoning global tech supply hub. Global tech giants like Samsung, Intel, and Apple have already established significant operations in Vietnam. Other global technology leaders such as Nvidia, Meta, and Google are accelerating their engagement, signaling the country's readiness to take its place as a high-tech hub in Asia. So what's fueling this transformation? How has Vietnam positioned itself as a vital player in this fiercely competitive industry? And what does the future hold for its role in the global supply chain? Join us as we dive into the factors driving Vietnam's rise as an FDI hotspot. But first, let's take a closer look at the latest investments by tech giant Nvidia in Vietnam and what they mean for the country's growing role as a critical link in the global tech supply chain.
Following major players like Intel, Samsung, and Foxconn, Nvidia, a global tech leader, has recognized the potential of Vietnam. The company has decided to shift its production chain to Vietnam, committing to invest over $4 billion USD. Nvidia has been eyeing investments in Vietnam for some time, with Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang said that his firm was committed to investing in Vietnam and making the country its second home.
Khi mà chúng ta chọn một nơi được coi là ngôi nhà thứ hai, thì họ phải thấy rằng là chúng ta được chào đón ở đó. Và ở đây rõ ràng ông Jensen Huang, ông ấy đến Việt Nam và được Thủ tướng Chính phủ trực tiếp tiếp đón và xây dựng những mối quan hệ, phải nói là những hình ảnh rất là như là những người bạn thân với nhau. Ông Jensen Huang ông cảm thấy rất là thoải mái và hạnh phúc khi sang những đất nước như Việt Nam. Thì chúng tôi có thể túm lại là yếu tố mà thu hút Nvidia nói riêng và cũng như cái tập đoàn công nghệ nói chung sắp tới vào Việt Nam, đó là yếu tố về chính trị ổn định, chính sách ưu đãi, hạ tầng về kinh tế, về nhân lực rất là hỗ trợ trong cái việc là giúp các cái tập đoàn công nghệ có được cái sự ổn định cho cái sự phát triển của họ ở Việt Nam.
Nvidia's strategic investment in Vietnam marks a transformative shift in the country's emergence as Southeast Asia's future AI innovation hub. The establishment of 2 AI centers, alongside partnerships with key local players like VinBrain and FPT Corporation, marked a significant step forward in Vietnam's plans to turn itself into a regional tech hub.
So Vietnam really has this growing reputation for turning out strong STEM graduates. We're really seeing more advanced industries like electronics and AI take root. And that's exactly the kind of environment that appeals to a company like Nvidia. So moves like this, they grab attention, and other companies see it. They see Nvidia coming to Vietnam and they start asking, why not us? Why shouldn't we go to Vietnam? So I think this could be a real turning point for Vietnam.
Nvidia said it planned to expand its partnerships with Vietnam's top tech firms and support the country in training talent for developing AI and digital infrastructure. The move represents a robust vote of confidence in Vietnam's future as a regional tech hub by one of the world's leading AI players.
Joining us today is Associate Professor Burkhard Strack, Associate Head of the Management Department at the Business School RMIT University, Vietnam. He will discuss how Vietnam is positioning itself to overcome challenges and opportunities in the global tech ecosystem and explore the country's promising FDI outlook in 2024. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Nvidia has announced plans to establish Vietnam as its second home in Asia with an R&D center and data center. So what motivated Nvidia to choose Vietnam, and how will this decision enhance Vietnam's attractiveness to high-tech foreign direct investment?
I think there are 3 different categories that mainly has driven Nvidia to come to Vietnam. And number 1, I think the overall economic sort of well-being of Vietnam, the growth that we can see and are projected. So the overall sort of economy of Vietnam is doing really well and is very stable. And this is something that, of course, big investors like Nvidia are interested in. But I think more specifically to Nvidia, what these AI data centers actually consume is energy. And the cost of energy in Vietnam is about half of world average. And finally, we have a qualified workforce for that, at least from a graduate perspective. We have 40,000 STEM graduates every year in Vietnam. And this is, of course, the raw material with which we run data centers, with which we run R&D hubs. So there's a whole basket of good things that NVIDIA is trying to leverage by coming to Vietnam. In terms of impact, this is, of course, lends a lot of credibility to Vietnam. NVIDIA coming, the world's largest companies in terms of market cap, more than $3 trillion, making a large commitment to Vietnam signals to a number of other investors that Vietnam is open for business and it's a serious place to come to. And then there are, of course, the typical spillover effects sort of like, okay, NVIDIA will train workers, they will bring in best practices, they will bring in a lot of transparency. So, with that, I think other local domestic companies here in Vietnam will be able to learn from Vietnam, from NVIDIA.
Now, the race to attract investment in semiconductors and AI is intensifying across Asia. Does Vietnam have a competitive edge in this race?
The pool of STEM graduates in Vietnam is about 1.5 million people. And this is a very strong competitive edge compared to any other country in the region. So I think no one in the region can easily show a track record of successfully attracting chip manufacturing like Vietnam did. Then, of course, Vietnam is a large tech exporter, right? So Samsung and Foxconn, Vietnam exports about $114 billion in consumer electronics every year. And so there's an implicit knowledge here in the workforce about consumer electronics, about perhaps things that use chips. And I think no one in the region can hold water to Vietnam on this aspect. Perhaps there's one challenge, though, that is that Vietnam must spend more on R&D in the future. So it's like if you look at all the R&D expenses in Vietnam, it's about 0.5% of GDP. If you compare that, for example, with South Korea, that's about 4.8%, or with China, where it's 2.4%, so it's 5 times more in terms of GDP. So there's also some challenges that Vietnam has to address to further attract investment in semiconductors and AI.
Soon after announcing its investment in Vietnam, Nvidia began recruiting engineers and managers in Hanoi to focus on designing and producing graphics processors. This increases the pressure on the country's limited AI talent pool, making the need for education and training of AI experts more urgent than ever.
Chúng tôi nghĩ rằng là chính phủ nên hợp tác với các cái tập đoàn hàng đầu của Việt Nam để làm sao mà xây dựng được một cái cộng đồng các cái nhà nghiên cứu kết nối họ lại. Còn về mặt trường đại học thì chúng ta hãy kết hợp với các cái đối tác trên toàn cầu ở góc độ từ về mặt chương trình đào tạo cũng như là về các cái cơ hội thực tập. Thì nếu chúng ta có thể làm như vậy thì chúng ta sẽ xây dựng được cái đội ngũ kỹ sư liên quan đến ngành bán dẫn cũng như là trí tuệ nhân tạo trong vòng 10 năm tới như mục tiêu. Và chúng tôi nghĩ rằng nếu mà chúng ta làm tốt thì cái số lượng này đáng nhẽ còn phải tăng lên nữa.
Something else that is very, very important are international universities coming and setting up shop in Vietnam as well. Because a lot of them, have programs in things like semiconductor engineering. Like I think Arizona State University, for example, is teaming up with FPT, if I'm not mistaken, to go and train people for this specific sector. So I think it's really going to have to go and involve many different elements of society, and it's definitely going to be a challenge. But if everyone comes together and lends a hand, I think it's definitely within reach.
According to the UK-based Oxford Insights research on AI readiness, which evaluates government digital capacity, technological capabilities, and data infrastructure, Vietnam ranks 39th out of 139 countries, moving up 19 places from the previous year. Within Southeast Asia, Vietnam ranks among the top 5 countries with over 5,000 engineers, 7,000 AI experts, and approximately 500 startups in the sector.
Following Nvidia's investment announcement, the company has posted a series of recruitment ads. How will this impact Vietnam's market for high-quality human resources?
They plan to hire hundreds of professionals in AI and in semiconductors, and that will raise the demand. And typically, when you raise the demand and the supply changes, it doesn't change, then the prices will go up. So this will happen in the labor market for those who actually have studied AI, have skills in semiconductors, and there is also some crowding out, which means that Nvidia will probably attract workers or employees that would otherwise work in other companies that would come to Nvidia. There is some limitations from the talent pool here in Vietnam. In fact, I think there are some studies that say there's only 3,000 to 5,000 professionals that really know AI. And so there's a skills gap. There is no doubt about that. And this means, of course, a mandate for universities, perhaps for the government, to recognize the skills gaps and then actually sort of ensure that the educational system will fill this skills gap.
Now, what training roadmap should Vietnam adopt to address the growing demand for skilled talent in these sectors?
The raw material is there. I mean, if you look at young people, I think there's a great interest in STEM, in science and in AI here in Vietnam. And so we have everything that it takes. So now it's in the government's turn to maybe open more spaces in public universities to ensure that in high schools there will be more ability to experiment with AI, that there will be specialized courses in semiconductor manufacturing. And the Vietnamese government, usually when there is a need from foreign direct investors, for example, they have in the past shown that they can react fairly quickly. So I'm quite optimistic that the government will do their job in terms of addressing the labor gap that we probably will see. I think there are some announcements of specialized certification programs. Now the government has, in this plan 2025, which emphasize digital transformation, for example, there are the structures in place in terms of training and certification probably as well for all things digital. So the kind of infrastructure is also in place. So, but I think 50,000 to 150,000 is very ambitious. But I think the government could also consider, that should go ahead with, sort of increasing the government budget for STEM education. Right now, I think it's about 15%, and perhaps that could be significantly increased, perhaps doubled, or sort of much more emphasis in the educational budget on STEM education. And then there is also a need for additional AI research hubs that may be attached to universities or to other private sector entities.
Vietnam's manufacturing and processing sectors continued to dominate FDI inflows, securing $20.2 billion or 64.4% of the total FDI. While this marked an 8.7% decrease year-on-year, the sector remains a cornerstone of Vietnam's economy, attracting investments in high-tech manufacturing, semiconductors, and electronic components.
Given all this recent announcement from the big tech giants, everybody is eyeing further investment into Vietnam. It very much reflects their confidence in Vietnam's structural transformation. Really what has been impressive is this transformation from being a relatively lower end of part of the manufacturing and now really climb up the value chain to the higher end.
Some of the world's leading tech giants already have concrete plans to relocate supply chains, build research and development centers, or expand investment in Vietnam.
These investments also reflect confidence in Vietnam's future. So NVIDIA's R&D center, Google's expansion, Foxconn's chip manufacturing plants, these are signals that Vietnam isn't just a production hub anymore. It's becoming a place where innovation happens. And of course, there's still plenty of work to do. And Vietnam needs to ramp up investment in R&D, strengthen intellectual property protections, and refine its legal framework to support high-tech industries.
Given the trend of supply chain diversification and complex geopolitical landscape in the world, Vietnam has emerged as an attractive investment destination for global tech companies thanks to its young workforce, high investment in infrastructure, increasingly open and transparent policy, high political determination, and enthusiasm.
Nvidia is not alone in choosing Vietnam as an investment destination. Google has confirmed its entry. Foxconn announced an $80 million investment in chip manufacturing. Meta plans to expand virtual reality device production, and SpaceX intends to invest $1.5 billion. So does this signify that Vietnam is evolving from a low-cost manufacturing hub to a clear global tech supply chain player?
I think every one of those players has a little bit of a different motivation. I think Google typically starts very slowly, very small with an office. So it's not a major investment. But Foxconn, for example, this is more serious because it also extends, what they have been doing. So within the Foxconn's value chain, they started with the earphones from Apple, and fairly lower value added. And now the last sort of bit was about chip manufacturing, which is much more higher value added. So yes, it does signal a shift. I think it's really a tipping point this year, and this is why this is so welcome, from Vietnam coming as a low cost sort of semi-skilled investment destination to a much more involved destination where, sort of people, we don't care so much about cost in this, but we care about the quality of the workforce. And I think this is a great signal that we are now at a tipping point. That being said, I think manufacturing is here to stay in Vietnam. There's a lot of prowess, a lot of ingenuity in Vietnamese manufacturing. So basically, I'm quite optimistic that this does indeed signal a shift to a higher value-added manufacturing in Vietnam.
Will Vietnam's long-term strategies such as infrastructure development, nuclear power development, high-skilled human resources, and maintaining political stability provide an advantage in the competition to attract FDI in the coming years?
No doubt about it. This is a very important for foreign direct investors. It's like three categories, perhaps. One is, the physical infrastructure, the ports, the roads, the information infrastructure. This is a necessary condition for foreign investors to come to Vietnam. And, sort of the upgrades that the infrastructure has now is undergoing now with the highway, with perhaps a high-speed train, with 5G technology on the information infrastructure side, very clearly makes Vietnam more attractive than it was in the past. And it's a kind of almost a necessary condition for FDI to happen. The political stability is still there, and I think the recent successes in FDI very clearly show, in a more uncertain world, the political stability of Vietnam comes at a premium, right? So it is sort of like, this is why Vietnam perhaps has received more for FDI this year than ever in the history of the country. I think there's a lot of recognition from around the world that Vietnam is a trustworthy partner in business. So overall, I think the kind of upgrade to the infrastructure is necessary. and it goes along with the political stability. And this is, in fact, a rocket fuel for the next 5 to 10 years that will sort of continue to increase the attractiveness of Vietnam for foreign investors.
Despite global economic instability, Vietnam saw strong growth in FDI inflows. In the first 11 months, FDI reached nearly $31.4 billion USD, a 1% increase compared to the same period in 2023. FDI disbursement in the same period totaled about $21.7 billion USD, up 7.1% from last year, marking the highest figure in years. The recent success in attracting FDI is largely attributed to the semiconductor and artificial intelligence sectors.
Processing and manufacturing industry remains at the heart of Vietnam's FDI story, at least for the time being. This sector alone accounts for more than 61% of total investment, which is over 299 billion USD in total. Electronics, textiles, machinery, Vietnam has cemented itself as a key player in global supply chains. So companies like Apple, Intel, Foxconn, they've already shifted operations to Vietnam and also across ASEAN. And Vietnam remains a top choice for firms looking to diversify their risks.
Vietnam, which has benefited from a shift of supply chains, may face challenges with potential trade restrictions under U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. However, Vietnam's outlook for 2025 should remain positive if it can raise productivity by strengthening the private sector and embracing new technology.
Cái áp lực thì nó có, nhưng mà nhờ những cái chuyển biến rất là tích cực liên quan đến mảng trí tuệ nhân tạo như công nghiệp bán dẫn, thì chúng tôi cho rằng là Việt Nam vẫn đủ sức có thể cân bằng cái áp lực này trong vòng 2025-2026.
We might see a little bit of cautious assessment among investors, but I think fundamentally for Vietnam, it still very much has a good story.
Vietnam's FDI performance in 2024 underscores its status as a competitive investment destination. With significant inflows into high-tech manufacturing, real estate, and energy, the country is poised to play a pivotal role in global supply chains.
Experts predict that 2024 will be a record-breaking year for FDI attraction in Vietnam. So what is your view on this projection?
We are now about sort of the first 11 months were already more than 30 billion. So very clearly, we will see increase in the numbers. But perhaps more important than just the numbers is, again, the quality of the money that came to Vietnam. It's serious investors, it's very credible companies that come here not to seek low-cost labor, but that actually have very committed and involved investments, where we actually can expect that later on there will be an ecosystem around, for example, an R&D hub in Vietnam. So it's not just like, okay, we're going to invest into an assembly line, and then if labor costs are too high, we're going to go to another country where labor costs are lower. These are long-term committed investments. They're almost irreversible, right? So you invest in Vietnam, and this means you're going to stay for the next 20, 30, 40 years. The investments we have seen this year. So I think one of the successes for this year is basically that the factory of Lego becomes operational sort of in the next few weeks. And Lego didn't come here to leverage lower energy cost or low labor cost. In fact, the government basically allowed Lego to produce their own sustainable energy, because they cannot go back to their shareholders and say, we go to Vietnam, we use carbon, we pollute the environment. So the shareholders would not have liked that. So the investors that come to Vietnam, they don't pursue what is called a race to the bottom, like looking for the lowest, cheapest regulations or something like that. They come here for the strategic location, for the well-trained labor force, and so forth. And clearly, 2024 has shown that.
Well, once again, thank you so much for being here with us. Vietnam's FDI performance in 2024 reaffirms its position as a competitive and attractive investment destination, With robust inflows into high-tech manufacturing, the country is emerging as a key player in global tech supply chains. Its young, skilled workforce, a dynamic startup ecosystem, strategic location, and supportive government policies provide a foundation for technological growth and sustained foreign investment. As global companies focus on diversification and supply chain resilience, Vietnam is set to remain a top choice for FDI across critical industries. These trends drive the country's transition from low-cost manufacturing to innovation-driven, high-value production, a promising outlook for domestic and international stakeholders in Vietnam FDI landscapes. And that wraps up this edition of BizLine. Stay tuned for more insights or download our VTV Go app from App Store or Google Play for the latest news and updates. Thanks for tuning in and see you next time.